Hey, you! Hey guys, how are you? I hope you are fine. Welcome to my new video about Blender. Today I want to talk with you about sculpting. For those of you who are following me on my social media channels, probably it's not a secret that I took part in Sculpt January this year and in 2018. I always record my sculpting processes during this challenge, and something that I see is that most of times when something goes wrong, it's always because of some mistake I did even before starting to sculpt. So I decided to do a video about 6 things that can mess up your sculpture even before you start sculpting. Let's go! Well, so let's start with the mistake number 1, the holes inside the curves. Often, to make a sculpture, I start with a base mesh that I make by combining different geometries together, and when I need to do something like a tail, for example, I use the Bezier curves. So now I want to add a tail to this little fox. What would I do? I'll use a Bezier curve to create the shape I need, and when it's okay, I'll convert it to a mesh, and then I'll join the two meshes together. Here I use both tools, but if you want you can use Boolean modifier. They basically works in the same way. Both tools is just a little faster. When it's done, I go to the sculpt mode, activate Dyn Topo and start sculpting. As you can see, there are some holes in my mesh, and this is a problem. So what happened? We left a hole at the bottom of our curve, and this is the result we get when we join two meshes and one of these, or both, have a hole. So how to avoid this problem? It's simple. After converting your curve to a mesh, go to the edit mode and just fill the holes. If we do this and then join the two meshes together, you can see that everything is okay now. We have no holes in our mesh and can go with the sculpting. But what if we don't want or can't redo this operation for some reason? Well, we can try to solve the problem by using an option of an add-on 3D print toolbox that you can activate by going to preferences. This option is make manifold, and it's supposed to fix the mesh by closing holes and removing internal geometry, but it doesn't work in all cases. This is its problem basically. As you see, this time it worked. Not perfectly, we lost a piece of our geometry, but it worked. It's better than nothing in many cases, by the way. Now we need to remake the missing part of our tail. So let's add another curve. And after giving the right shape, we convert the curve into a mesh. Then, after making sure that we don't have holes and intersections in our mesh and that it's manifold, we can join everything together. And in this way, our problem should be basically solved. Let's see. Activate Dyn Topo. In fact, everything is okay and we can go on with our sculpture. Okay, let's talk about mistake number 2, forgetting about internal faces in mirror modifier. And this is what I did when I sculpted this mask for a Sculpt January 2018. Actually, this was a mistake I did in many sculptures at the beginning of my sculpting path. That's because it took me a while to understand the origin of the problem. In this case, I used a cube with a mirror modifier to extrude the base mesh for this mask decoration. Sometimes when we use the mirror modifier, it can happen to forget that by activating the clipping and merge options, we can delete the faces that are in the middle. In fact, they're not going anywhere, they stay inside our mesh, waiting for the right moment to mess up our sculptor. And when we apply the modifier and go to sculpt mode, this is what we have. This strange margin that's impossible to smooth out. The same margin we can see here. It's a clear sign that we have some internal faces inside our geometry. In fact, if I turn on this transparency, we can see. Here they are. Anyway, if we want to avoid this problem, we just have to delete this face here, the one in the middle. Just select it, press cancel and select faces. Now, if we go to sculpt mode, turn on the Dyn Topo and start sculpting, we can clearly see that now we don't have any kind of weird margin like before, and that's great. So, what to do if we didn't notice the problem at the beginning and now we don't want to lose all the progress we did so far? Well, the solutions we have here are pretty similar to those we used for the first problem. First of all, we can try to use make manifold option. Let's see if it solves our problem. Nope, nothing changed. Another thing we can try to do is to add another mesh, like this cube. Model it trying to cover all the parts with extra faces inside. I'll duplicate it, in this way I can reuse the mesh later. Hide the duplicated mesh. We select our two meshes and do the difference Boolean operation. In this way we subtract from this mesh the other one. Now that we did our hole, we will use the make manifold option to close the geometry. Once we're done, let's unhide the geometry we duplicated before and scale it in edit mode on the x-axis. Make sure that there are no spaces in between. I'll bring this piece further behind because it's touching the other horn. I'm not going to model it all because it's just an example. But keep in mind that it would be perfect to create something more similar to what you had at the beginning. In this way you will have less work to do in sculpting. Then I go to Bool Tools and hit Union. Ta-da! It worked! Now we have a mesh without internal faces. Yay! Let's see if it really worked. Go to sculpt mode, Dyn Topo, and we see everything's okay. We can see that during all this problem-solving operation we lost a bit of our symmetry, but no worries, because we can fix it. Just go to Dyn Topo options, open Remesh and click Symmetrize. Here you can choose the axis. Now we solved the problem of our mask. We lost a little piece in the middle that we have to resculpt, but it's better than losing the entire mesh in my opinion. And anyway, I always say in these cases that prevention is better than cure. So remember to not leave the faces in the middle of your mesh when using the mirror modifier. Let's go to the problem number 3. The intersections of the geometry in the skin modifier. For those of you who use this modifier, you probably know that it's pretty helpful for creation of base meshes, especially for limbs. But sometimes this modifier can cause you some problems that will make you crazy. At least that's what happened to me when I did this fat kitty for the sculpt January this year. Let me explain. Usually, when I sculpt an animal, I first sculpt limbs and body separately. Then, when I'm happy with the shape of both, I join them together. At that point, I have to work just on crossing areas of the meshes I have joined. This allows me to avoid problems like sculpting on a belly when I want to sculpt on a limb, for example, without using masks. The big problem of the skin modifier is that if you bend it too much, it creates intersections inside the mesh that are pretty hard to fix, like here and here. In this case, I also used a mirror modifier that created this intersection in the middle that I haven't seen. When you have a shape like this one with all these intersections, you can try to do make manifold, but for this cat it didn't work. You can also try to adapt the solution we used to fix the mask, but I think it doesn't make much sense because the areas to cut are too many and too big. At this point I think that it would be much less time wasting to redo the legs from scratch. So how can we handle the skin modifier to avoid this kind of problems? It's pretty simple actually. If you see that there are points with bended parts, just separate that parts. In this case, for example, the best thing would be to split the leg in 3 separate pieces, like I did here. See? First piece, second piece, third piece. That all together make a leg. If we join them with a boolean, we should have no problem. The only thing we have to pay attention to is this part. I didn't want to change the shape because I like it. So to solve this problem, I just apply all modifier, then go to edit mode and just select the part with intersections and delete it. Then I go to object mode and do the make manifold to close the holes. At this point we can go on and join the other parts of the leg. Now, if I hide the body and activate transparency, you can see that now we have no more intersections inside the legs. This means that we can go on and sculpt our legs. Let's pretend that I did the sculpting parts and then join them with the body. And as you can see, it's so fine and we have no internal geometry that can spoil our sculpture. And now let's go to the mistake number 4, non-centered origin. Sometimes it happens that you're working in edit mode to create a base mesh for your sculpting. You move, scale and extrude your mesh. Then you start to sculpt and realize that there's something wrong. Even if you activated the symmetry, your mesh isn't symmetrical at all. In this case, for example, one part is bigger than the other. If you see something like this, don't panic. Probably the problem is that the origin of your subject is not perfectly centered. That's a problem that you can solve by going to Object, Set Origin, to the center of mass, volume. Now our origin should be perfectly centered. At this point we can go to Sculpt mode, choose the side we like more and go to Dyn Topo. Activate Dyn Topo and open Remesh section. Choose the right direction and click Symmetrize. Now we have a perfectly symmetrical mesh and we can go on with our sculpture. And let's go to the problem number 5, inverted normals. If you're working on your sculptor and see that in some areas your mesh behaves in a strange way, like even if you've selected the add option of a brush, some areas keep subtracting, like here. Some parts are subtracted and some are added. The most probable thing in these cases is that after a transformation in edit mode or a boolean operation or something like this, some of the normals of your mesh have inverted. To fix this problem, we just must go to edit mode, select all by pressing A, then go to Mesh, Normals, Recalculate Outside. Now, if we come back to Sculpt mode, we'll see that our mesh behaves normally again. So if we have Subtract option, everything is subtracted, and vice versa. So this problem also is fixed. And here we are with the mistake number 6. Transformations in object mode. It could happen that we add an object to our scene, like a cube, scale it, and then decide to sculpt it. But we see that something strange happens. All new vertices are like stretched, and that's because we scaled the mesh in the object mode. If you want to scale a mesh and then sculpt it, you have to do it in edit mode. As you can see, in this way, you have no stretched vertices, they're perfectly normal. If we make a comparison between the two meshes, it's pretty evident. This one is stretched and this one is not. If we want to fix a mesh that we scaled in object mode, we just have to go to object mode, object, apply, and select rotation and scale. Now we can go to Sculpt mode, activate Join Topo, and go on with our sculpting. And this one is fixed too. Before closing the video, I would like to tell you a couple of things. The first one is that starting from this week, I'll upload some of the sculptures I did for Sculpt January and Gumroad. For each model, there will be a pack with this low process video, Blender file, and STL configured for 3D printing model. Obviously, light setup and materials will be included in the Blender file. Just keep in mind that I worked in Blender 2.8, so the Blender file can't be opened in Blender 2.79, and I'm not going to upload all my Sculpt January models. I'll choose my favorite ones, but if you have a model that you would like to be uploaded, just let me know in a comment or write me on one of my social media pages. You can also buy some of my models on websites like CG Trader, Blender Market, TurboSquid, and so on. Obviously, if you have suggestions regarding topics I talked about in this video, let a comment under the video. And I hope this video helped you in some way. If it did, leave me a like and subscribe to my channel. So thank you guys for watching and see you in my next video. Bye!